Swans family, nice to have you on board for a rare pod. We haven't done too many in recent times. We've just been waiting for the season to gather steam. We knew that we'd start to get some momentum going. Drew Jones, hello to you. We thought we'd just bite our tongues until we started to see the early season tide turn.
Hey, it's great to be here, and it's great to be competitive in a game of football. I know we shouldn't be celebrating a loss, but it felt a lot different on Saturday afternoon. And was when Harley kicked that goal and grabbed the jumper, punched his chest. I feel like that was the first time that I genuinely got excited and celebrated and felt good as an Eagles fan for ages. It felt like it had been a long time since I'd let out like a proper roar of approval to anything that had happened in a game. How did you feel?
Well, it felt, I want to get into that moment in a bit more detail, so we will. But it felt as if we had some serious league-wide pride for the first time in the season. Like, it was our moment where everyone went, oh, hang on a second. Like, all the naysayers and the wind-up merchants, like, shut up for a few minutes. You know, you could feel their collective silence across the country. Oh, yeah, we probably should give that credit. Like, the kid can play serious football and he's clearly happy to be there. There was no bite back from anyone. And then off the back of that, we played pretty well. Oh, yeah, there's some decent signs there. There might not be easy beats all season. They might beat Richmond next week. You know, you could just feel that across the nation. And it was our moment early in the season, which we haven't had yet. So that was enjoyable. And, yeah, the game on the whole, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of it. But, I mean, for example, I live in Sydney. You know, my father-in-law and brother-in-law are mad Swans fans. I mean, they were giving it to me before the game. The only thing I said to them after the game is, you might have won. I guarantee you, Eagles fans enjoyed that a lot more than Swans fans did. And they had no reply.
Yeah. No, there's no doubt about that. I liked that it was in Mount Barker and it had this like nice country community feel. It was at Gather Round. And I think Jared said it last night or maybe the night before. It's like he was giving the Eagles his last chance. It's like, oh, I'll watch this game because it's Mount Barker and it's Gather Round, and we had a standalone game. Like, it wasn't hidden on a Saturday night or on a Sunday twilight, sort of when people were doing other things. Like, I reckon people were still desperate for footy that early in the weekend at Gather Round. So, and because Harley did that early, probably it engaged everyone. And you know, we've been unwatchable and embarrassing really for quite a while. So it gave me a bit of pride as an Eagles fan to know that there was something we could hang our hat on. And the fact that we were competitive in the game, obviously the Swans didn't quite turn up to play, but our pressure was immense. I think at one point, you know, Jordan Lewis pointed out on the commentary, it was like, oh, the Eagles' pressure's at 240. I was like, geez, that's probably the first time in club history it's ever been that high. But it was just nice to be watching the game, and they were like, oh, this is what the Eagles are doing. Here's how they're stopping the Swans. Commenting on little moments from players and talking about Elliot Yeo being back. And, yeah, it's like it means a lot, I reckon, to obviously us, but everyone who follows the club, that we can just have one little moment of not being embarrassed by our football team.
Well, it might build into a bigger moment this week, which we'll obviously get onto. Look, we don't need Jared Waitley to deliver his State of the Union on when the Eagles can be watched and not. I mean, I like Jared on footy, but, you know, come on. I find that annoying the way he says that. Like, I've given them one more chance. Thanks, Jared. Like, you're letting the whole nation know they can watch the Eagles or not. Like, come on, mate. I found that a bit annoying. I mean, the pressure was great. Yeah, like, the Swans weren't quite at their best, haven't been for 2 weeks, but I think we were a major cause of that. I still think that the Eagles won't mention it publicly, but last year's game had an impact. If that wasn't touched on during the week, well, I'll go Like, it had to be.
Did you listen to Simo's presser? Because I was there at Mount Barker the day before the game, and I said,
okay.
I was like, I know you don't want to talk about the past. And he sort of like almost cut across me as I was asking the question. He's like, don't bring up last year. I was like, well, the last 3 times you've lost by a combined 326 points against the Swans, so clearly they're doing something right. There's no doubt you lose to a team in that manner, the worst loss in club history. Like that's on the whiteboard, surely.
Yeah, and that would have been discussed, and the players would have been out to prove a point. I'll ask you this, Drewy. Speaking of Adam Simpson, if we had $1 each every time he mentions small wins, where do you think we could take this podcast for a live show? I'm thinking like the Grand Ballroom at the Mirage in Vegas, potentially.
I thought Vegas was the first thing I thought of. I was going to say, you and your wife could, buy a livable and large property to live in Sydney, which is very difficult to do. And I could maybe find a way out of this rent trap in Melbourne.
He goes there a lot, doesn't he?
Yeah, small wins. I know Tom Barrass yesterday. Tom Barrass did his presser yesterday, and he sounded like Simo. He was talking about identity and brand, and I want to talk about something that Barrass said a little bit later when we get on to Harley Reid. But it feels like there are some things that have been put in place, Garby. When you watched the first few weeks of the season, we haven't been good all the time, but we've shown patches like quarters here and there where we've been able to pressure around the ball, we're halving or winning contested and ground ball, and sort of getting back to trying to be competitive at the source. Some of the defensive structures aren't totally right, and our ball movement hasn't been great up until the weekend. But do you feel like watching the Eagles now that perhaps there are some building blocks in place that are going to allow us to be competitive for longer?
Yeah, and there were strong signs, I think, in the first 3 games. I mean, the Swans' performance was surprising in a sense because they're such a strong side. But if you look back and peel it back over the first 3 games, that was coming. We had 3 really difficult contests, and I don't think the criticism overall was warranted based on our performance, okay? So it gets to that level because we get blown out by the Dogs. But, I had friends watching the Bulldogs game going, no, the Eagles aren't this bad. No way. Like, your contest has been right up there. It was just one of those games where we kept trying to go forward with some pace, and it happened in the first 3 weeks, to be honest. We were just giving up silly turnover after silly turnover. Like, it was just really basic, really frustrating. And the scoreboard blew out dramatically because of that, and we failed to take any of our chances in the first few games. Our kicking's been really poor as well. But we haven't been that far off it. Our contest work has been really good. Our ball movement's just been poor. We've had, the word I use is, to be honest, anxiety. Like, it feels as if we've been so anxious with the ball in hand to try and make an impact on the opposition that we've rushed it, we've coughed it up, and the opposition gets on the front foot against us, and they're happy to take some punts and some gambles with their pressure because they know we'll make a mistake. And that transpired. But after 3 really tough games against quality opposition, it just came together that little bit more against the Swans. Maybe the week away helped them just relax and bond a bit together and just click. And so that gives us a lot of confidence going into the Richmond game. But I don't think we were that far off it. I think the score lines were skewed in the first 3 games across all of them.
Yeah, well, the Port Adelaide, obviously a top 14. Giants might be the best team in the competition. Yeah. And then the Western Bulldogs, I think you've summed it up well, not taking chances. The ball movement was off. The Dogs probably were feeling like they needed to exact a bit of revenge after what we did to them last season. And I reckon the majority of Eastern States, football experts, there's no way they watch West Coast against Port or the Giants, but they might have watched the Bulldogs game because it was an important game for Luke Beveridge and the Bulldogs to try and get their season going, and perhaps that revenge factor, that was a game that people might have tuned into. So they've just seen West Coast get a little bit blown out and get, it's the same old Eagles, probably not really appreciating what's actually unfolded so far this season. So, yeah, it's been promising at times, and then we probably played 2.5 to 3 really solid, good quarters of footy. Last quarter was tough, but we were running out of legs against the Swans on the weekend, and they're a good side. We're going to get going at some stage. But, yeah, I know we want to get to Harley, but it does set up a really good opportunity for us to win, or at least take it right to the line against the Tigers on Sunday.
Yeah, we'll break it down a bit later. I'll be tipping us. It's one of those weeks you're in tipping comps or whatever. You can finally tip your team.
Yeah.
Like, even though you're outsiders and the majority might go with Richmond still, like, no, I can finally put us down and have some confidence that we'll actually get the job done. So that's exciting. I think it's definitely winnable for us. So we look forward to that one on Sunday afternoon with a lot of interest. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I don't think they pay enough attention to us, a lot of the pundits. People saying, oh, the Eagles are finally trying to play quick. It's like, no, we've been trying to do that for a year and a half. We just didn't have the cattle last season, and the confidence went completely. We tried to play that way in the first few weeks, which is why we kept getting burnt on turnover, because we kept coughing it up, trying to go through the corridor with pace. We've been trying to do it for a while. It came together a lot better against the Swans, and we are trying to go through the corridor a bit more. That we tried to play with pace for a couple of years, but now we're trying to actually target the corridor more than perhaps we have in the past. So that's encouraging. It's going to hurt us at times. We're going to turn it over in dangerous areas and get burned. But hey, we'll be better off in the future doing it. We'll be better off with Harley Reid. So yeah, the moment for me was significant, the jumper pull, Drewy, because as we know, so much has been said about this kid, right? Like from this point last year. And he doesn't say much in reply. Like he's a country kid. He's a young 18-year-old, if that makes sense. He's mature on the field and his body's mature, but he's still got a lot of growing up to do as a person. So he doesn't say a whole lot in reply. I felt like that was his way of expressing himself. He's maybe not so confident in front of the microphones and the cameras yet to say exactly what he's thinking. But he thought on the footy field, that's where I feel comfortable. That's where my personality can come out. And he clearly planned to do that in advance for when he kicked his first Eagles goal. And that was his way of expressing himself. And he's not saying I'm going to sign for 7 years at the Eagles. What he's saying is, I'm happy here. Just shut up and leave me alone for now. I'm committed to this club for the moment. Let's see what happens in a couple of years.
Yeah, it felt like it's, like I'm me, and this is where I am. And I think it said a lot. Like, it was genuine goosebump moment. Like, I think, there's a world where in 10 years' time we'll look back at that and think, like, far out, that was such a significant moment in our rebuild, in our history. If things go well, and if he decides that he wants to be a long-term West Coast player, like, that's going to be a moment that lives on forever. But regardless of what it means in the long term, in the short term, it gives us all hope, and it makes us feel like he's one of us. And, like, I don't know about you, but as a West Coast fan, working in an office full of people who follow football and none of which are West Coast fans, I'm constantly having to sort of hear people talk about, Reid leaving and this and that and the way that we play and how we're going. And it's just like you're the constant butt of jokes when it comes to football and your team. So it makes me walk a little bit taller, and I'm sure everyone feels the same, going to work or talking about footy with their mates. Like, it feels like Harley's one of us. Yeah. And we weren't, like, we sort of had hopes that he would be, and he certainly said all the right things. But now we've seen evidence that he's on our team, and he's part of our little family. And because we've been attacked from all angles, and because he's had people speak on his behalf saying he doesn't want to stay, he doesn't want to get drafted to the Eagles, he's going to leave after 1 year, blah, blah, blah. Like, he's been able to sort of have a right of reply through that moment. So it meant a lot to me, and I'm sure it did to a lot of people. And then it wasn't like it was a flash in the pan. Like, it wasn't just one moment in the game. Like, it seemed like that just gave him an extra leg. And his monstrous ability to just find a way through traffic, throw blokes off him, so strong for an 18-year-old. I don't know if I've ever seen an 18-year-old do something like that. There was that moment where he was running with the ball through the back part of the centre square, and he made a beeline for Rowbottom, because he's like, oh, well, Rowbottom's going to come and try to tackle me, so I'm just going to run towards him and just fend him off. I know he was probably shooting for goal when he had that centre clearance, and Marek ended up marking it and getting a goal. And then he went back and found McInerney and gave him a little shove in the chest. And Like he was into the game, like he was engaged, and yeah, it was a pretty incredible performance.
Well, after his first couple of games, I wrote on Twitter that, Harley Reid is mind-blowing for a second gamer. And most people agree, but there's a few smartasses coming back saying mind-blowing. He hasn't done that much yet. A couple of fend-offs and 10 disposals, it's hardly mind-blowing. And my view is there aren't many now four-gamers who play his role in a team that is as poor as we are overall. Like on the ball, in the guts, and not only playing on ball, but actually being the main ball winner at times and enforcer in there. How many first gamers, first 3 or 4 gamers do that? Some people brought up Matt Rao. I'm like, yeah, Matt Rao did. He was incredible early on, but they won 3 of his first 4 games. It's much easier to do it when you're winning and you've got players around you who are clearly dominating. Like we have been getting smashed more often than not. You know how hard that is? A team that's low on confidence and you're not sure of what you're trying to do just yet. I just feel he's been phenomenal. Like we've seen very few players play that role so early in their career. And his fitness, I think, he's just getting used to the rigours of AFL football. And I thought Danielle Laidley made a really good point overall, not just on Harley Reid, but on the whole team. Great column in the West. And she spoke about, Danielle Laidley knows about AFL coaching. Like, we all assume that our teams are fit, don't we, Drew? Like you assume that you have pre-season, then you start and you're fit and everyone's at the same level and right to go. Well, young teams are nowhere near that level. Like it's running out games at the intensity required to win games for 4 quarters is really hard. And we've shown it in bursts, but we haven't been able to maintain it. And that's why we get blitzed 3-4 goals at a time. And Danny Laidley was making that point. And Harley's the same. We saw it in bursts and then he gets a bit tired and he struggles a bit more. But in those bursts, and I thought he improved his fitness on the weekend, was able to do it for longer. I mean, he is just a phenomenon. Like we could have on our hands like an absolute generational player. And that's been the talk, but now you can see it. And yeah, I'm pretty amazed at what he's capable of doing. It was great to see the First Lady of Football, Caro Wilson, stand up for us on Monday night against, some who have been withering in their assessment of what Harley might do in regards to his Eagles' future, what he should have done going into the draft. Who knows what will happen, mate? Like, if we don't improve, we're going to have a battle to keep him. I agree with that. Like, we need to improve to keep him long term. That doesn't mean he doesn't like the club. But he knows how good he is and he'll want to compete for premierships. What I will say is we had absolutely no choice but to pick him unless we were offered pick 2 and 3 from North. That has become apparent. And even if he does leave in the future, touch wood, that doesn't happen, we will get a king's ransom in return because he is showing just how much ridiculous talent he has.
Yeah, it feels like he's shown now that he could have 28 possessions and kick 6 goals in a game. Like he could tear games apart.
Completely. He's Dustin Martin Mark II. He is. Yeah, it's just not a ridiculous comparison. It is spot on.
And ultimately, if he turns up in the mood and he has one of those games, the opposition won't be able to stop him. Like there's nothing you can do. So that means that conceivably we've got a player who can win Norm Smiths, who can win Brownlows, who can win games, not necessarily just himself, because obviously there's 23 guys who are involved in football. It's not like the NBA. You can't just have LeBron come out and get a triple-double and win. But he's got the capability of tearing a game apart and there's nothing that the opposition are going to be able to do about it. And that is a pretty exciting prospect. I mean, it wasn't to the level of the Judd Brisbane game, but there were sort of echoes of making a statement on the big stage. And he's going to have that Judd game probably.
Yeah.
Maybe this year. Because one of the things I said, I think on a podcast, maybe a month or 2 after we drafted him, was that some of the feedback that I was getting from inside the club was that, hey, Harley's never been a pro athlete. Like it's not like the way that Dacos and Sam Walsh and Rao and a few others came in, they had almost been a full-time athlete before they got drafted, but that's not the case with Reid. He'd never trained more than twice a week in a proper football sense. So this is the first, like he's had a preseason under his belt and now he's playing full games of footy. His fitness base, his fitness levels, his strength and conditioning, all that stuff, it's getting better every day. And the sky's the limit with him at this point. But, we've noticed over the first few weeks that you'll get little bursts from him and then he sort of fades out of the game. So we see that class in little clumps. But on the weekend, he showed that he's already, able to extend out the amount of time that he's having an impact on games. And that is just going to get better and better as the year goes on. And imagine in 2 years what he's going to be able to do. So that's just a little window and there's so much more to come. His ceiling is absolutely, the sky is the limit, literally. Like it could be anything.
It's the Eiffel Tower.
Yes. And, that's bloody exciting. He's on a 3-year contract. We're able to offer him a 1-year extension in a couple of weeks officially. And then, we're going to get to a situation where probably 10 Victorian clubs are all going to come for him if we don't re-sign him to an extension before that. But that's a long way down the road. It's a long way away.
Yeah, this 1-year extension is interesting. Firstly, just playing forward, like midfield and forward. Maybe the odd stint back, but if I'm in opposition and I see Harley Reid down back, I'm breathing a sigh of relief.
Yeah, I agree.
I do not want to see him coming into the attacking 50. Not after what he did on the weekend. Like if I'm a back 6 or 7, I'm rejigging on the spot. All right, who's got this kid? Shit, he can kick 2 in 5 minutes here. They're all of a sudden on the back foot. You see him in defence, all right, he can do his fend-offs and try to get him out of trouble there. That's not going to bother us too much. Right, so play him forward because he's going to cause the most havoc there mentally for a starting point than he will, anywhere else outside of on the ball potentially. But this extra year, do we do it now, Drew, or do we just leave the kid alone? I worry about rocking the boat too early if we go after him. I'm sure the Eagles have got a strategy in place, but I get the feeling we'll just hold off a little bit and let him settle and stick with our overall philosophy of just be easy on the kid and treat him like everyone else.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I'm probably on the fence, but I probably hadn't thought about it quite like that. The opportunity to give him a little bit of breathing space and say, we back you. We're not worried that you're going to leave. We're not going to try and lock you down for another year straight away. Just enjoy living in Perth. Let's talk about your future at the end of the season.
Yeah, or just later on in the year, just settle in. Yeah, we'll get there. Or, we'll have chats with your agent in a couple months or so after the bye. Just don't worry about that yet. You're still here for another 2 years after this. That's the most important thing. And, we're not worried about you leaving. We reckon you're going to love this place. Show confidence. Yeah. Right? If you go to them straight away now, lock him down, it's like, desperate. Why are they so nervous, right? Yeah. It's like you're too keen with the girl. Why are you so nervous? Or a girl with a guy?
That's in 4 texts in a row. Yeah, just relax.
Yeah, play it cool. Play it cool.
That would have been good advice to me as an 18-year-old, Garby.
Yeah, and me. I would have no doubt stuffed it up, but let's hope the Eagles don't. So who else has impressed you, mate? I mean, there's a lot of talk about Harley and justifiably so. Who else has impressed you in the game over the Swans and in the first few weeks and is providing some extra encouragement?
Oh, well, Elliot Yeo, it feels like he's back to being himself. And it's made such a huge difference to our football team. I think Tim Kelly said a couple of weeks ago, he said, we all walk taller when Yeo is playing in sort of his beast mode fashion. So that's been really awesome. And, I think we're all happy for him that he's been able to get his body right and now he's playing good footy and good to see him being used in that inside midfield role. One I just wanted to touch on is Cal Jamison playing in defence. Yeah. So I just want to stick up for him a little bit because he has some moments where he's really frustrating, drops the odd mark, fumbles. He fumbled in the goal square on the weekend, which cost us a goal. But I think you need to understand, we need to try and understand, A, he's still learning. He's a ruckman playing in defence. But also there's a reason that McGovern is playing so well right now. And it's probably because Jamison is back there. So him freeing up McGovern to be able to intercept and be able to play his, most effective role is really important. So I like that we've tried something. I know he's still got a lot of work to do, but I like what he's brought to the table. And then Harry Edwards, when he's fit again, potentially, offers us another option back there. But like that we've been able to sort of utilise McGovern better. And then obviously that helps that Gov is fit, but then also the role that he's played, I think, has been quite important.
Yeah, he's been really good defensively. I think we can all potentially have a class action lawsuit against the Eagles for years taken off our life for when he has the ball in his hands. That might come to the boil at some stage in the future because it is nerve-wracking. But, he's a competitor, and that's what I like about the Eagles' decision to play in there. Like, I think we all thought, yeah, he's not long for the Eagles list, the way things are going with Flynn coming in and the ruck options and what he's shown so far. But, with Bazzo out, Edwards out, we need another defensive option. I'm not sure he's quite got the skills and the smarts to play forward. But as we saw in his first couple of seasons, his main attribute is his competitiveness.
Yep.
Like, he goes the whole time and he's got some toes. All right, let's give him a defensive role. Play him on the third key forward and you just focus on keeping that player quiet and helping our defence out. And he's done that really well. He panics when he's got the ball in his hand. He'll work through that a bit better. Maybe he's just the kind of guy that if there's nothing on, just go long, Jamo. You're not going to pick something off in the corridor. That's not your go. But my goodness, he is sticking to his task really well. So that's certainly been a find. Obviously, Yowie and Gov have been fantastic. Tim Kelly had a good game on the weekend. Bailey Williams in the rucks, he's doing a really good job at the moment. Jakey Waterman's playing good footy up forward. We knew he had that in him. He's filling in for Oscar really well. Jack Darling, we know, is a long way off his best, but he's competing strongly. Cripper gives us a fair bit. Looking forward to seeing Tyler Brockman back this week. I think he's shown good signs. He's just not getting enough of it because in his position, it's just hard to have an impact on the game when we're behind the eight ball in contests. But I think we'll start to see him contributing a lot more. I'm excited for him to come back in. There's some guys who need to lift, like Campbell Chesser needs to give us a lot more. Noah Long had a big game on the weekend. I was disappointed with him in the first few weeks. I thought the second year Blues kicking in here, he's been anonymous, but he had a much better game against the Swans. I think he knew that he needed to. So that was encouraging. Chesser needs to have one of those games now because I think he's on the brink of being axed. He's just not giving us enough at the minute. So hopefully Longy's game inspires him to have a 20 possession contest and kick a goal and actually contribute and be a bit more effective for us going forward.
Yeah, I don't know about you. Have you noticed that Chesser seems to look better and more comfortable when he's in traffic?
Yeah,
and
definitely.
That's a problem because inside midfield spots are pretty hard to get, as we know. I don't know if he's going to get the midfield inside clock that he needs to be effective. He needs to develop as a wingman or as a high half forward. He needs another string to his bow. He can't just only have impact when he's in traffic because he's not going to get those opportunities. That's the sense that I get. He looks like he might be an inside midfielder and he's not as effective in other positions. So that's a slight concern. Petruccelli, I know we talk about him a lot. I don't want to get bogged down with him, but he's had little moments. He's still only getting 10 possessions a game. So I'd like to see that get up to 20. If he could find a way to get and have a bit more impact consistently, he could be really handy for us going forward. So I know I'm conscious you're on the clock here, Garvey, but do you think that we're not just a chance to win against the Tigers, but do you think it's a game that we feel like we should be winning?
Should be that's a good question. Should be maybe a stretch at the moment, only because the Tigers, on paper, if you'd said at the start of the year, Richmond will be without Lynch, Bolter, Prestia, Hopper against West Coast round 5, I'd say yes, should be. But they've been a lot better than we thought they would be to start the season, haven't they? They beat the Swans. They've been unlucky in a couple of other games, But I think we're a big chance because I think their outs will start to come to the boil a little bit. It becomes a bit harder when you're without Lynch and Bolter for a second week in a row. The midfield's put under more pressure, off the back of the game on the weekend without, Prestia and Hopper and the travel to the West, and we've had an extra day's break than them. It could just take its toll a little bit more. We'll have our confidence up from the weekend. We're back at home. The crowd will be buzzing. I think all of that could help us. I think if we start well, there'll be momentum. I think we could win, definitely. I really think we can. I think there's reason to be excited about the Eagles getting 4 points and not just having the small wins. So, yeah, I'm encouraged. I'm not going to go as far as to say we should win, but I think we could, and I'll back us. I think we will.
No Oscar Allen hurts. This is the kind of game where they're missing some of their key defenders. Like, he could have kicked 5 or 6, and that elevates you to a winning position. So I spoke earlier, maybe on our Twitter spaces, about the fact that Oscar Allen being out of the side just robs us of a genuine match winner. So, we need Waterman to kick 4 or 5, have a big game, or Darling to find some form. And, that chase down tackle that he did on Matt Roberts gave me a bit of hope that was the old Jack Darling, just a glimpse of what he used to be able to produce, him and Kennedy back in there when they were buzzing around. So, yeah, we'll need a performance out of the box to give us something, because the Tigers are not a bad football team.
No.
Under Uze, they're playing well, but they are severely undermanned. So that gives us the opportunity. So I think it's going to be a good game, but I think they're going to be hard to beat, because I think the foundations of Richmond's team under Uze are really strong. So it's going to be hard. But I'm excited for the game. I'm excited to go into the game with expectation. I'm in Sydney over the weekend for a wedding, and I reckon everything's wrapped up by 6 o'clock Sunday. So now it's just a question of whether I can find somewhere in Coogee that will put the game on for me. But I'm confident I can find a nice spot and have a cold beverage and enjoy the game. And I just wanted to note this before we go. Tom Barrass spoke yesterday, and one of the questions by Stevie Allen was, are you relishing sort of the idea of Harley Reid up against Dustin Martin? And Barrass said, if I know Harley, and the impression that I've got from him early on in knowing him as a footballer and off the field as well, is that he'll be looking for Dusty and looking to stick a don't argue on him. And then if one comes back the other way, no worries. Like, he'll cop it on the chin, literally. So the idea of Reid and Martin around the ball, both the king, the new king of the don't argue, and sort of like the old legend who's sort of fading towards 300. I love that. I love the new ball against, the 3-time Norm Smith.
We look at it from the Hardy point of view. You can bet your bottom dollar Dusty's saying, I cannot wait to stick it to this kid. Let's knock him down a peg. Yeah. Like, settle down, son. This is still my domain. So he'll be going for him as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's going to be, and that is a really interesting little subplot to what I think is going to be a very interesting afternoon for us.
Yeah, we can win. I'm excited for it. Get on top early, get the crowd going. Liam Baker as well. I've got a feeling that we'll sign him for next season, Drewy. I don't know. I just reckon that one might come to fruition. I think the Tigers' big trump card is the captaincy. They can play that with Baker, and that might get him over the line to stay there. But it feels as if there's some movement there in our direction. So we can have a win, big crowd, put on a show. Liam Baker might walk away going, yeah, okay, I could do this for the next 3 years of my career and be a part of the Eagles going in the right direction. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I like it. And I think, if English and Baker, if we can pull those two off, it's a nice thing to get more competitive, to get some senior players in the door and show Harley that we're serious, and put good players around him. I think that's important.
Yep. All right, mate. Enjoyed the chat. Thanks, Nest listeners, for tuning in, and give us your thoughts. We love your questions. Pick up on anything that we've said. Take us to task if you want, and let's have some chat on Twitter about this pod and leading into the game against the Tigers. Go Eagles.
Go Eagles.